Good morning, Holston Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome to our YouTube channel. I'm the Reverend Tiffany Sapp, the minister of this church, and my pronouns are she and her. Thank you so much for joining us today, and make sure to like and subscribe. This week has been an object lesson for the topic of our day, which is rest. Since the weather has forced us to rest inside our homes this week, we invite you to join us in our hour here in as restful of a way as possible. For me, this means pajamas and my favorite fuzzy blanket. Maybe it means something different for you, but if you want to, you can pause this video and you can make yourself a cup of tea or go get your favorite blanket or your Barbie slippers and put them on as we enter this space of rest today. And I'm going to start us with a question right off the bat. Are you tired? So here's a slightly more complex version of that question. What kind of tired are you? Today, we explore an idea that there are several different kinds of rest and that we need all of them to be healthy and happy. Knowing what kind of tired you are also shows you what kind of rest you need.
Good morning. I'm Sarah, she, her, and I am your service leader today. My first services were online and via Zoom, and I am so glad we have that previous experience so we can continue to bring you this service today. However, this is my first time wearing pajamas, which is such a unique delight. I'm usually wearing a dress or even a costume. Thank you for your presence, your voices, and your light today. We are so glad you are here. Here is where you can rest, where nothing is expected, but that you bring all of who you are in the presence of this loving community. Creating this space of acceptance and rest is part of sharing love, which is part of our vision for this community. I invite you to listen to our vision statement and reflect on its words as we light the chalice. We work together as a church to transform ourselves, our community, and our world by sharing love, pursuing justice, and seeking wonder.
Today, we won't have our regular candles of community time, but I would like to remind you that for upcoming services or for pastoral support, you can always email me at minister@hvuuc.org with your joys and concerns. Instead of our candle lighting practice, I want to invite us to take a moment to think of each other and to send each other love wherever we are. Think of this community that you love and that you miss. Imagine them all bundled up warm in their homes. And as you think of them, hear my wishes for all of us. Today, my heart hopes for your heart that we can be soft and warm, that we can be cozy and healing, that we are safe and loved. I pray that we can be the best community that we can be, that we live our values and our highest ideals wherever they are and whenever we are. That one day we might truly be able to call ourselves beloved community. Imagine what that looks like. Imagine what that feels like. And imagine how restful it would be.
comes from the book Sacred Rest by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. Dr. Dalton Smith is a medical doctor who has encountered multitudes of patients in her practice that needed rest to the point that their physical health was being impacted. In this section, she describes a familiar situation of being overly busy and headed toward burnout. A life without periods of rest will not endure the daily grind. Rest is not for weaklings. Hollowing out space for rest is work. Finding time to rest is the hands and feet of the promises we long to claim. It means saying no. It means having limits with ourselves. It means having limits with others. It takes courage to rest in the midst of an outcome-driven society. It takes strength to walk away from good in the pursuit of better. The people pleaser in me would rather say yes and omit the rest. I found through the years that I can't please anyone, including myself, when I'm burned out. Funny how everyone can smell the char of your slow burn, except the one standing in the fire.
Thank you, Sarah. And I will just acknowledge that I am hearing a very active dog moving around my house right now. I don't know if it's affecting you all or not, but he's part of my rest. So I'm glad he's here with me. So there is this strange thing that happens to me over and over again as someone who preaches. Whatever the topic is that I choose to preach on, it seems like the universe or serendipity or God or coincidence or the great mystery of life, however you want to frame those things in your mind, it's always saying to me, okay, you want to preach about this? I'm going to give you a whole lot of personal experience with this topic leading up to the sermon. In fact, this trend has been so noticeable in my life that I'm going to have to schedule a sermon on winning the Powerball very, very soon. That is definitely the sort of life lesson that I am ready to wrestle with. But seriously, as I spent the early hours of my week reading Sandra Dalton Smith's book, describing her own needs for rest and her own experiences with burnout, I said to myself, oh, I've done that thing again where I choose to preach on the topic that I need the most. And this time it's rest. Do any of you here watching with us feel that what you need the most right now is rest too? If you do, you're not alone. Emma Beddington is a journalist for The Guardian, and she reports that Google searches for the question, why am I tired all the time, began spiking in the summer and fall of 2021, and they have not let up. And Dr. Dalton Smith wants to offer us her research and experimentation that came to her through supporting her medical patients who were carrying many fatigue-related symptoms with them when they came to her for help. I do need to offer a disclaimer about the book, though. While it offers some really useful stuff, it also starts to sound like a Bible study at times, and often keeps the focus on what an individual can do rather than what we can collectively do to address systemic problems connected to this matter. She seems more focused in on self-care than community care, and we know that self-care can only take us so far, especially when disabilities and an unjust world can deny us the resources that we need to achieve the kind of individualistic self-care type of rest that she talks about so much. Her chapter on spiritual rest especially reveals herself to not be very UU compatible. Even those of us here who maintain our connection with Christianity would be pretty turned off by her practice of talking about her God to her patients in the course of her medical practice. Clearly, that wasn't something that I was aware of when I decided to use this resource. But so for that reason, I'm focused on her framework and using a bit of her medical research where it's relevant. But I'm really more focused on how we interact with these categories of rest more than what the doctor orders here in this book, because I'm not going to tell any of you to get right with God and that's going to fix all your problems. That's just not what we do here. But what Dr. Dalton Smith does do for us is remind us that humans are multifaceted, and so are our needs for rest. A nap is not always the answer if we need a spiritual practice. And sometimes we need a hug more than we need meditation. And as we start digging into these kinds of rest, I learned really quickly that rest is not about sleep, but it's about finding the kind of peace and renewal that we need to keep living and enjoying our lives. So the first category is physical rest. So I know that I just said that rest isn't always about sleep, but physical rest is absolutely part of the equation because all of our bodies are different, both in age and ability. How much physical rest we each need will differ, but the signs of our need for physical rest are there. The lesson of physical rest is to listen to your body. What is your body saying to you right now? Some weeks it might be telling you you need to sit down more. This week, with all the snow days, your body might be telling you that you need to get out of this house. It's different. It's different, and it depends on what your body's telling you. While physical rest does take the form of sleep, it is so much more than that. Our bodies speak to us in the ways we store tension too. Too many of us have jobs that are not very active, meaning that we probably need the right kind of gentle exercise and stretching more than we need a nap. If we listen to our bodies, their soreness will tell us where we need to put our attention. And here's some practices that Dr. Dalton Smith suggests for better physical rest. That whole listen to your body piece. Sometimes you need to get up from that desk and walk and stretch. And sometimes you just need to lay still because our bodies tell us things when we're still that they don't tell us when we're active. She also suggests establishing a better bedtime routine that gets you away from screens for at least an hour before bed. This is advice that we've all heard, but are we practicing it? Next, we look at mental rest. While it's more common with people who have stressful or thought-heavy jobs, a lot of us know that our brains can get overwhelmed and need mental rest. My desk that I am sitting at right now is a metaphor for the state of my brain. I've got bills, meeting minutes, 9 books, an overflowing planner, notes for this sermon. I even have a measuring tape for some weird reason, and a half-eaten bag of biscotti. So the brain gets cluttered, but mental rest declutters our brains and blows away the fog. Does your brain just never shut up? Then mental rest is what you need. Without mental rest, we'll get into accidents, make avoidable mistakes, and end up snapping at someone we care about. We all need some quiet time every day to turn our brains off and invite an inner quietness to ourselves. It's ironic because we praise busyness, but often the sort of creative problem solving that we need to address the big questions of life only come when our brains have had enough of a break to come at the problem from a new angle. Here's some of the practices that Dr. Dalton Smith suggests for better mental rest. First, you gotta pay attention to your brain and see what it's trying to tell you. Figure out what activities don't provide a mental reward for you, and then time block those activities. What I mean by that is pay attention to what sort of work creates mental fatigue in you, and then do those things early in the day, preferably in a 30-minute block. This has been a long valued piece of conventional wisdom, and if you want to explore it more, just Google "eat the frog first." This does work, trust me. And of course, another way to get mental rest is to meditate. And there's a lot of ways to meditate, and we play with and explore meditation often in this community. If you don't have a meditation practice, you might want to just try a Google search or a YouTube search, or reach out to me, or reach out to one of your other friends in this community who you know is a meditator. The next kind of rest, which is connected to mental rest, is emotional rest. And I like what Dr. Dalton Smith says about emotional rest so much that I'm going to read you a paragraph from her book. Some of you have been trained to shelve your emotions. You bottle up your feelings and place them on a high shelf, and then you leave them there as if they don't exist, but they do. Shelved emotions are the rawest kind. They are not tempered by exposure and are easily bruised on contact. So contact becomes the enemy, and we cocoon in our isolation. We limit the ability to use our emotions for our own healing. Emotions are powerful. They can override thoughts, influence our relationships, and transform our behaviors. They empower us to understand ourselves and overcome challenges. Emotions are to be explored, encountered, and enjoyed. They were never meant to be bottled up. And I just love that passage. It reminds me that life has hardened us. Life has even instructed us to harden ourselves against our own emotions and socially punish people who express their emotions. It's one of the reasons why modern life is so lacking in basic empathy and compassion. And it makes me wonder, how can we rediscover our softness and use it for the powerful tool that it is? Hopefully, we will find our way to do this through engaging in emotional rest. Our doctor here says that we find emotional rest when we find the people and places where we can be wholly ourselves, where we no longer feel the need to perform or meet other people's expectations. And for those of us with religious trauma, this might sound like the opposite of a church. But I wonder if we here can do better than that. I hope that's why we've gathered as a community and are seeking our transformation together. Dr. Dalton Smith suggests that we start by paying attention to our emotions throughout the day and noting how and when they rise and fall. Our relationships affect our emotions, and we should pay attention to that. Your emotions may tell you that you need to draw a boundary with someone who's constantly bringing you down, and that's okay. It's allowed. It's necessary. Before we move on to our next type of rest, I want to invite us to a practice of rest to break up this longer than usual sermon. Karis, our music director, has a practice that brings her to a sense of rest, joy, and peace that connects to several different types of rest: emotional, spiritual, creative, sensory. And I've spoken with other musicians in our congregation who do something similar too. Instead of playing a song or having any specific goal, they'll just get on their favorite instrument and twiddle around, letting their mind and spirit wander, letting their creativity flow. So let's rest with Karis as she shares her practice with us. Thank you. Thank you, Karis. This practice flows nicely into spiritual rest, as I imagine that musical practice connects you to all that is sacred within you and around you. So, spiritual rest. We humans are meaning-making machines. There is something deep down inside of us that craves meaning and connection. The existential geniuses of the 20th century taught us that even when we create our own meaning, it is enough. And religious practitioners around the globe have been exploring how to find connection with our notions of the sacred, even if what is sacred to us is those things that are beautiful and sacred in each other. Connection and meaning give us hope and purpose. My prescription is much more open-ended than Dr. Dalton Smith's is for spiritual rest. I think a lot of us would be allergic to her Pray the Existential Angst Away program, so here's some practices I suggest. Explore what in life is meaningful to you, knowing that it's okay if it shifts and changes as your perspectives change. Play with spiritual practices like prayer, journaling, reading, meditating, the arts, or whatever makes you feel connected to this world we live in until you figure out what actually works for you. And then do that. And let's keep on building community together where we exchange our thoughts on meaning and practice that work, supporting each other in it. And speaking of community, our next kind of rest is social rest. Now, my beloved introverts are probably thinking, thank goodness, I need a rest from all these people. But social rest is not isolation. Social rest is when we find comfort in our relationships and social interactions. It's still social, but it's the right kind of social. It's the kind of social where you feel seen, connected, loved, and safe, not the isolation you feel in a crowd of superficial people. We are many things as humans, but one of the things that we are primates, and primates have adapted to the dangers of this world by creating social groups. For most of us, in our socialness, we give energy to those in our social circle when we have it to give, and then we receive energy from them when we need them. It can look like listening, supporting, remembering birthdays, inside jokes, and daring to be authentic. And for this, face-to-face time is key. Social media, which once seemed to be the cure for isolation, is actually part of the problem, encouraging superficial interactions over ones where you experience the rest of being received with love and authenticity and acceptance. The science shows that social rest can literally save our lives. A study of 300,000 people found that lacking a strong supportive relationship increases our mortality risk on the same level of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And if this is worrying for you, I have good news, especially for our introverts. When it comes to social rest, it's about quality, not quantity. One trusted friend that you can get real with is actually enough. I personally have had a really challenging year. And since I find my social rest outside of the congregation, which is completely appropriate for a minister, you all don't know the details of that challenging year, nor do I want you to have to bear the burden of it. And you don't have to, because I have a standing monthly breakfast date with a local colleague, and another that I occasionally get dinner with, and a large handful of ministers that I laugh and cry and play with when I'm on retreat twice a year, and a best friend that I can talk to whenever I need to. And for me, having these people in my life has been a lifesaver. I'm a highly social person, so you might not need a whole army of friends like I do, but do find your social resting place, please. Here's what our doctor prescribes for social rest. First, remember that social media is not where social rest is going to happen. Second, listen to people. Often when we struggle to have meaningful relationships, it's because we're doing all the talking. And finally, take that risk of being real with someone, of taking off all of that emotional armor and just being who you need to be. I know this is hard. It's a risk, but it frees something in you when you try it and it works. And if it doesn't work, then they were not the one. Just keep trying. Our next kind of rest is one that I hadn't even considered before reading this book, but that made so much sense to me, and that is sensory rest. Some of our neurodivergent friends here are going to relate really hard to this one. Every day, our poor nervous systems are overwhelmed by the amount of sensory data we need to process. This was not a problem for our ancestors who lived simpler, quieter lives, but it is a problem for us. And the answer is sensory rest. Some folks are naturally sensitive to sensory input, especially people on the autism spectrum. Just like other forms of rest, each of us have different levels of need and different access to resources for each kind of rest. And some of us do need more sensory rest than others, and that is so very okay. The more we can build a community that understands that and accepts that this is a real need, the more inclusive we can become. Here's the sensory rest that our doctor describes. Unplug. You know what I mean. Now you just have to do it. She says picking a time every day that you have zero technology. And I must admit that this was really hard for me at first, but now I relish the part of the day that I am away from the computer, phone, and TV. My books and my paints are a sensory blessing, at least in part because they make it easier for me to unplug. Also, take some time to understand your sensory turn-ons and turn-offs and indulge in the sensations, and feelings that make you feel good. I have a family member who has big sensory sensitivities, and it has basically made them my sensory guru. They helped me pick out the amazing fuzzy blanket that I'm cuddling with right now, and it really has changed my life. I never knew how much I needed sensory rest until I rediscovered the joy of reading a good book with this blanket. And finally, our last type of rest is creative rest. Creative rest really takes it to the next level. A lot of these other kinds of rest are what we need to survive, but creative rest is where we thrive. Creative rest is not about being an artist, a poet, or a musician. In fact, as soon as something is a job, it is not rest. Creative rest is about being free to mess around with the ideas and modalities and the stuff of creativity without worrying about the final product. I think my dog is indulging in some creative rest of seeing how hard he can thrash a toy back and forth behind me. Creative rest is about creating space in your life where the gifts of awe, wonder, and creativity can emerge. In some ways, you need to have space to be bored before your creative brain kicks in. That is the hard part. Our doctor here suggests that you can build sabbaticals into your life, that you can grab your calendar and block out half an hour or a few hours, a weekend, or maybe even an entire week of space to seek out awe and wonder and to play creatively. And when you hold that sabbatical space, don't fill it with distractions to escape the boredom. Hold that space for creativity. So, what has this exploration of the 7 types of rest taught me? I think one of the most valuable challenges I've received here is that my tiredness might tell me about a need that I have, but that I need to look a little more closely at how I am meeting that need before I just assume that another night on the couch watching TV is going to give me the renewal and the rest that I need. Some of these kinds of rest are actually pretty active. And so this study has invited me to focus more on understanding more about what I really need, rather than just automatically assuming that what I need is to do nothing. What do you need right now? If you're anything like me, you've probably heard a few areas where you need rest. And that's okay. We all do need all 7 kinds of rest, after all. But which one do you want to work on during this snow day? This sermon has been full of options and practical advice, and we're not going to be able to do them all. And we don't have to. Each of our needs are unique. So which one will you choose today? What types of rest do you need the most? Sarah is going to help us extinguish the chalice now with a blessing of the kind of spiritual rest that we can hope for.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding you. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love.
Thank you for tuning in with us this week. We love you, we miss you, and we hope to see your faces again soon. Here's our benediction. May justice lead us to the calling of this moment. May wonder meet us right where we're at. May we discover our collaborators and our companions, and may love guide us on our journey of transformation. Blessed be. Amen. And go in peace.